slave for their perpetual death.
Good evening, Resistors. You are listening to the WideShut Webcast here on the Resistance Radio Network. As always, I'm your host, Keelan Balderson, and you can check out all of my work at WideShut.co.uk. For everything Resistance Radio, also be sure to check out resistradio.com. At the start there, once again, you heard Making Money by Consensus off the AJ Humor YouTube channel. I'll paste that in there in case you want to listen to it again at a later date. There you go. Kind of fits with the theme of tonight's show, as I'll be playing my interview with Austrian economist Graham Sharkey in a few minutes. Recorded that earlier today because of scheduling issues, but I'll be playing it in full as if it was live anyway, so no worries there. In fact, I think Graham might come into the chat room at some point. The reason why he couldn't do it live is because of his internet bandwidth. Prevents him doing things like Skype because it's quite intensive or whatever. So we couldn't do it live, but I think he might be able to come into the chat, or at least that's what he was saying earlier. Excuse me. But something before that, which I do think is quite important in regard to the problems in the Middle East, and that's good old Tony Blair and his recent appearance at the Iraq War Inquiry. And something I noticed while watching it live was that he kept talking about Iran. He kept harping on about how Iran is a nuclear threat and they're a problem and it's looming and we need to do something about it. And he just kept slipping in Iran every few minutes. And I did an article on this the other day. It got picked up by InfoWars as well. I'll just paste it in the chat so you can read it at a later date or along with me or whatever. I mean, how bold do you have to be to sit there being questioned about an illegal war which was based on lies while pushing another illegal war based on lies? It is absolutely ludicrous. This man needs to be in jail. Let me just lay out some facts for you. Iran is part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Time and time again, they've passed the IAEA tests, the International Atomic Energy Agency tests, for diversion of uranium. They can only enrich uranium to 20%, and they actually do that in an American isotope reactor that they gave to them. For a nuclear weapon, you need 90%. Iran only has 20%. That's a fact. There's no getting away from that. And then you actually need the science and the ability to make and fire a weapon. They don't have that. They're nowhere near that. And Dad has even been on mainstream telly, on mainstream news, telling people that he doesn't want a nuclear weapon and that they haven't got a nuclear weapons program and that he'd want to debate it with Obama to explain, oi, what the hell are you on about? Yet they just keep running with this propaganda against Iran. And it really is the next WMD lie. And Tony Blair can sit there at the Iraq inquiry promoting this propaganda. He's laughing in our faces, folks. And something I find truly ironic is that America, Britain, Israel, we do have nuclear weapons. In fact, Israel is not even signed up to the treaties. Iran is. But Israel isn't, so they're basically saying, if we want to fire off one of our nukes, then we'll do it. Yet we're targeting Iran here? It makes no sense. Well, it does make sense to us who understand the New World Order and this contrived war on terror and the global takeover of corporations. And in my 7/7 film, 7/7 The Big Picture, I used a quote from one of Tony Blair's foreign policy advisors, Robert Cooper. And he said about the Iraq War and the war on terror that we need a new kind of imperialism, one that's compatible with human rights and cosmopolitan values. And what I take that as meaning is we're going to have a new world order, we're going to take over the Middle East, but we're going to spin it to make it seem like we need to do it for human rights and democracy. It's masking that imperialism. You know, Blair keeps talking over and over again about how Saddam was an evil man, and he would have done it anyway because, you know, whether there were WMDs or there weren't, because Saddam's regime was just evil. Well, we're not the policemen of the world. That's not our responsibility. And it's disingenuous to make things up like WMDs to get Saddam out of power, especially when it ends up killing millions of people. What about their human rights? And I'm actually in the process of going through both of his appearances at the Iraq inquiry. It's something like 6 hours long, but I'm picking out each bit that he mentions Iran, and I'm putting that in a video and basically showing his propaganda and debunking it. So stay tuned for that. That'll either be out tomorrow or the day after. But I want to get back onto economics. The main headline in the UK is that UK GDP has fallen by 0.5%. What a surprise that is. The other week it came out, you know, the figures, the national statistics, record youth unemployment. Even the mainstream media are starting to second guess the cuts. Things aren't looking good. And just remember, we never were out of recession. This is a great recession. You know, they used to call it the Great Depression. Well, this is the Great Recession. And enslaving us with cuts that aren't even a blip on the national debt is just ridiculous. And we've talked about that a lot. But for more on that, and lots of other topics, including China, the Irish bailout, investing in silver, I'm going to go to my interview now with the Economic Assassin Graham Sharkey. Joining me on the line now, resistors, is Austrian economist and financial blogger Graham Sharkey, otherwise known as the Economic Assassin. You can check out his articles at economicassassin.blogspot.com. That's economicassassin.blogspot.com. Thanks for taking time out and coming on the show today, Graham.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
No worries. Well, you're obviously not Austrian. For those only half listening, the Austrian school is a school of economics. So just go through the basic principles of the Austrian school, how it differs from, you know, the backward system we currently have, the talking heads we usually see on BBC or CNN. Just run down the basics of the Austrian school.
Well, like you said, I mean, the economics that we see on the television is otherwise known as Keynesian. And the only way that, one of the most important ways what the Austrian school differs is they will have, they believe in completely free markets, no government intervention, none of this bailout, no stimulus, none of these tax cuts, none of these financial austerity measures, completely free markets. How that differs from what we're seeing now is obviously in the US, we've got the quantitative easing. They're on their second bout of that now. Over here, we have had the VAT and all of this more stimulus pouring into the system. I mean, we've had quantitative easing over here as well on a smaller scale, obviously a smaller economy. But with the Austrian school, what I believe and what like hundreds and thousands of others now believe is that we should have none of that government intervention, no stimulus whatsoever.
Well, it's a good point, because I mean, they failed, so why should we just carry on the exact same system? I think it's time to start thinking of different systems. So, you know, you make a good point. From your perspective, what caused the recession that we're still in right now, really? I know people like Peter Schiff predicted it. Lots of people saw it coming, obviously not the people on the television telling us. But it seems the Austrian school was bang on the money, so to speak, in that regard. So what's your take on the crash? Was it just the mortgage fiasco? Was it the underlying system itself? What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, you mentioned Peter Schiff there, and he's a fantastic Austrian economist, and he was bang on the money. And there's nothing more that Austrians would add to what Peter Schiff said. But I mean, it was you got this subprime mortgage, and all that happened with the subprime was that you had all these malinvestment, and because you had easy money and easy credit coming, feeding the boom. And then when we seen the subprime mortgage, all that was the markets like breaking out of showing it in the weakest link in the chain. Peter Schiff was there on CNBC and all of these other corporate stupid programs, and he was getting laughed at because they were saying that this subprime mortgage was only affected, and it will only affect the subprime. But I mean, that was only it was only coming through the weakest link in the chain there. From what all that happens with this recession is that we have all of this overinvestment, malinvestment, and where we use up all of these resources, i.e. bank loans and things like this, we feed a boom, and then the market inevitably corrects itself, and then we have a bust because all of these freeze up, and then we don't have any of these bank loans, we don't have any of these resources or easy credit, and it turns to tight credit where banks want their money back. But no one's got the money to give them back because they poured them into these malinvestments, which are just busted.
Absolutely. I mean, it's essentially, you see these booms and you think of it as growth, but it's a false growth because it ends up all coming back down in the end. But it's never the people that benefit from any of it at all. It just goes back to the bankers. And it's like, the too big to fail. We bail them out even though they failed, and it's essentially taking their debt and putting it on the people. And it's just a ludicrous system, and I'm glad we've got people like you going out there and actually trying to explain it to people.
Yeah, well, obviously explaining it to people and then having them sort of accept it is two massively different things. I'm inundated with emails every day now arguing against the case and things when it's clearly in our faces. I mean, like you say, we've got this fantastic thing through YouTube now where people like Peter Schiff and other Austrians can make these videos and put them out and date them and say, I'll a year from now make these great predictions, and so almost sort of Nostradamus viewpoints, and then come back to them a year later when it actually happens. But then these Keynesians, they just look for a scapegoat and go, oh, well, it's coincidence. No, it's not. It's bad investment. It's exactly what we said it was. And now we're giving you money for something for doing a bad job. I don't see how that, in no other job in the world, no other sector, would anyone get more money for doing a bad job. I mean, I use an outrageous metaphor all the time. I say, if a builder goes and builds a house and then 6 months later a family moves into it and it falls down, kills every one of them, and then it would be like the relatives of that family going, all right, well, don't worry about that, Mr. Builder, but we need another one now because that one's fallen down. Do you want to have another go? You wouldn't have. That's exactly what we're doing with these bankers. It's going, oh, thanks for ruining our economy and taking all our money and providing us with all these stealth taxes and enslaving us. Do you want some more of that? Can you do it again, please? And no one's out there, sort of, unfortunately, and I use the word loosely, power, saying, you know what, bankers, stop doing this. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. Let's get on to a more realistic economy now. Let's get back to a proper economy. Get this false economy out of the way. Don't allow these easy credit and these derivatives market to absolutely flare out astronomically and run up all this debt. I mean, we are now in a position where we're never going to be able to pay back in the UK and in the US this national debt. I mean, it's almost 5 trillion. This is ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, what I don't understand is that they talk about these cuts, but realistically, as far as I can see, I mean, I'm not an expert, but you can't ever pay back that debt just by cuts. It seems like a completely illogical road to take. We need a new system.
Yeah, you can't. it is mathematically impossible to pay back this money on the route we're going to. And there isn't really a route unless we went back to a gold standard, and in the case if it was on the US dollar, like bank to that, gold would have to be revalued at like a million US dollars, and that's the only way. But that's never going to happen, not in my lifetime or yours. But these cuts and these austerity measures that we're seeing in the world over, it's about as effective as rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's never going to make. It's never going to. This. You got to see. This is all for media. This is all for we're being seen to do something about it. It's all politically motivated. Why we got into this debt is because the governments are bailing their friends out in the financial districts in London and US to get votes. That's all it is. This is where it comes from. This is where the crash comes from. There's no one in Westminster or Washington that actually knows anything about economics.
Yeah, I would agree with that totally. They just seem to. It's just political talk. I mean, there was a documentary not too long ago on Channel 4. I didn't completely agree with it, but they went around different MPs asking them, what's the national debt, what's the deficit, and they couldn't even explain it. But I want to go back to something you said a couple of minutes ago, that Peter Schiff goes on mainstream news and often gets ridiculed by the talking heads. And I know that you've gone through the sort of university system, I believe, learning about economics. I mean, what's the system like when you go through it and they're teaching you about economics? Are they open to these kind of things, or was you kind of a maverick in the system?
Well, on a smaller scale to what Peter Schiff had, I had exactly the same in the classroom. Like, you laughed at, you get sniggered at, even by the lecturers most of the time, which is unbelievable. And there's no democratic feel to the classroom, as well as being on CNBC. They just won't accept an Austrian point of view. There's not, in my whole time in the education system, not once was an Austrian economist mentioned to me, nor even the actual word Austrian, like the term Austrian economics. Never heard of it. It was just Keynesian, like to an extent monetarists. Yeah, and that was it. And that you're indoctrinated to think that. And I mean, I'm not the only one in the world or in the UK that thinks like an Austrian. It's a growing school now, which is amazing. But in my year, in my class when at university, I was the only one. So when you've got 90 other people saying one thing and agreeing on the same thing, and then you got one person saying something else, you're bang to rights. You're never going to convince a lot of them. But who's laughing now? I mean, what's going to happen is that those economists, they're going to go into the jobs in government and things like that, and they're going to be tomorrow's exchequers and things like this. But it's feeding a phony system. You're telling people more lies throughout the generations, and they're believing it and they're following it, and then that's what keeps running the national debt and the budget deficit.
One funny thing I saw was during the student protests, there was a group of people from, I believe, the London School of Economics or whatever, protesting the cuts. And I'm thinking, unless you understand the truth about the economic system, what you're doing is quite ironic, because in 10 years or whatever, when you become the next level of economist, you're going to be doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and even the coverage of those cuts with the students, that thing served. That I don't think Rupert Murdoch could have been happier when he's seen all of these student sort of riots, because he thought, oh, well, brilliant. We'll focus on these riots, and then we'll slip, the cuts in the other door while everyone's looking left. We'll go right, and we'll use this as a scapegoat. We'll say, oh, look at these people. They're protesting. Let's give them, this is a perfect time to implement our policies whilst no one's looking, sort of thing,
Yeah, I almost saw it as a test. We get the students angry to start with. We see how it plays out. We see how angry they get, And then when the real cuts come in, we've already demonized the process of protesting, so people are unlikely to challenge the system at that point.
I mean, well, the thing is, if people thought those protests were bad, I think obviously you say that they've been demonized and things like that, and quite possibly true, but I think we haven't even touched even 5% of the protests that are going to happen around the world now, because what happens is, I mean, the students who, funnily enough, haven't got any money anyway, and then you've got all of these families over the Christmas period who spend on these credit cards. But now, the end of January, when those credit card receipts and things and those bills come in, then we're going to see the real protests with these budget cuts and things like that, because no one has the money to pay for them. People are losing their jobs left, right, and centre. The job market for I think for 18 to 21 is growing exponentially. The unemployment market there are no jobs here. So we're going to...
Yeah, I believe there was, the other day it came out, record youth unemployment, and you have Cameron talking about, the back to work campaign and all this demonisation of benefits and things. But the problem is there are no jobs, the economy has crashed. You've got to come up with a proper system. You can't just say, go back to work. It doesn't work like that.
It's essentially what they're doing. I mean, the best way I think I've heard it explained is, all we have is a wall cavity, and we've got a burst water pipe there, and it's rotting the wall. But instead of tearing down the wall and fixing the pipe, we're building another wall in front of it, and it's only a matter of time before the water comes and floods that one too. That's all these cuts are, and this is all what Cameron's doing. Cameron hasn't got an absolute clue of what he's doing, because none of his advisors do. He doesn't call the shots. It's all his financial friends, all of these financial elites who are pulling the strings. But whether Cameron knows it or not that he's being shafted, then
well, before he got into power, the elite could pay. I saw this on a documentary, actually a mainstream documentary, funnily enough. But you could pay David Cameron $50,000 to have a meal with him and essentially set policy for when he got into power. So,
but things like that, I mean, that was on a mainstream thing, you see. But I'd love to see that get repeated every day on the television to show the absolute joke of the political system is. I mean, the world over as well. This isn't just David Cameron. I mean, we're talking about everyone here. We had it with every president you've had in the US, every prime minister you've had everywhere else. They're all bowing down to they're these oligarchs, but the majority of the people just aren't seeing this, and it's unbelievable to me with the amount of information that we have now, thanks to the internet, that people aren't accepting this.
Well, we'll move forward a bit now. What do you think happened in Ireland? Because most countries were already well in the red. Ireland seemed to be doing quite well until the banks obviously failed. And the government forced that debt onto the people. What's your take on the whole Irish bailout? Should they have just defaulted on the debt? Why wasn't there anyone telling them to default on the debt?
The problem with Ireland is because it is such a, again, this is relevant to the subprime sort of crisis back in 2008. It's because they're such a small economy that they are sort of the weak link. So it was always going to, financial chaos was always going to spring there first because of the size of it. Those banks in Ireland were insolvent. They're back with the crisis, and instead of allowing those losses that those Irish banks had, instead of letting the private sector take the hit on them, the government did exactly what the Austrians say not to do, and they bailed the banks out. And now, because the losses were bigger than which was projected, the Irish people are now having to pay for it. And like you say, why didn't they default? Heavens knows. They definitely should have defaulted. I didn't see anyone telling them to default, but I know that all of the Austrian school was saying to default. But now you've got all of these Irish people footing the bill again for these bad policy and political have been implemented over there. This is ludicrous. No one. I can't believe we didn't have more riots on a larger scale over there. Because if someone had told me that I had to pay for all of these bankers things like the Irish people did, I'd have been out there with an AK-47. I think, you know. And what happened over there was their corporate tax was extremely low. It was the lowest in Europe. That was just a green light for all of these foreign banks to, you know, head over there and set up shop there and flood their market with easy credit, because they were allowed to, because they had such low taxes that they thought they could afford to give out all of these loans and stuff like that. But little did they know that it's phony wealth. And now in Ireland, you've seen income tax has gone up, the VAT has gone up, the minimum wage has come down, but corporate tax has stayed the same.
Well, one economy that does seem to be strong is obviously China. And we talk a lot on here about the Western elite. And one perspective is that China is one of the last roadblocks for this new world order, as we call it. I mean, they own a lot of the US debt. Obviously, a lot of savvy businessmen have already jumped ship to China a long time ago because they saw this all coming. But what kind of threat does China pose to the Western economy right now? Are we seeing the end of the dollar?
We've been seeing that before China started their massive growth spurt. What will happen with China, I believe, is that they will allow the US, they will allow themselves to buy up some more US debt, that allow the US dollar to devalue, because all that's happening is the RMB and the yuan is strengthening. And as soon as they see fit, they drop the dollar, detag the yuan. Not many people know that the Chinese yuan is actually tagged to the dollar, the US dollar. So whatever the dollar does, the yuan does. And as soon as they depeg it, then that's the next day will be hyperinflation for the US dollar.
Just explain to people how do they peg that together?
Well,
how does that work?
They do it of the interest rate. So they share the same interest rate exchange rate with the US dollar. So whatever the US dollar does, the Chinese yuan does. And what that does is that manipulates the value of the yuan to keep it artificially low. And with all this new world order stuff, you've seen a lot of mainstream American talking head economists calling China currency manipulators and things like that, because that's exactly what they're doing. But what these Americans don't understand, that by China artificially keeping their yuan low, they're allowing the export market to be valued at a price where Americans can sort of still afford to buy stuff. As soon as the yuan detags from the dollar, who's going to pick up the export market? The Americans? Don't think so. They're not going to be able to afford it. But what will happen then is, because most of China's products get exported to the US, all of these iPhones and gimmicks and things like this, China will not benefit from that, because they'll lose on exporting their own products. You see, but as soon as their currency is allowed to appreciate, once they do detag it, then there'll be free reign. They'll be the strongest economy I think we've ever seen.
How do you see the top levels of the US elite? How is that going to play out? Are they going to try and integrate with China and sort of go along with them? I know Obama recently met with Chinese officials. Cameron's met with them recently. It seems like both sides want to work together. You know, they're kind of, you know, giving these fluff speeches to each other. But then we get reports of China testing missiles near the US coast, kind of letting them know who's boss. You know, if anything goes wrong, we're happy to attack you or whatever. But do you think this will eventually become some kind of big military showdown, or will the elite of both countries work something out that mutually benefits the top levels and just, you know, forces the US people into the shithole?
Well, what will happen is, I think Obama and the rest of the Americans have sort of succumbed to the fact that the US dollar is now worthless. And they've seen that what China have been doing will then allow them to have the strongest currency in the world. And then they've sort of said, well, why don't we like sort of prepare ourselves for this, for it being the next world reserve currency. And China, by doing all these missile things, they realise if you control the money, if you're sort of the financial big fish, then you sort of rule the roost, sort of thing. So I think, like you say, they're just showing, like flexing their muscles, saying, look, it's just not just the money we've got. This is what we got as well. And all of these economies are now just flocking to China to say, can we have a piece? Can we jump in on this? Because the pound, the sterling, and the US dollar will be worthless. And what are they going to do? Nothing.
Do you think anyone will come out and say this on mainstream US TV, or are they literally just going to throw the US people under the bus and run off to China?
Either way, it's the same outcome. I mean, you either go on this corporate media and then say, oh, that's the end of the US dollar, folks. China's the new sheriff in town. And then panic ensues. You know, everyone dumps the dollar, hyperinflation goes up, and then you see riots, chaos in the US, or you throw, like you say, you throw them under the bus and make a run for it and hope for the best. But either way, it's the same outcome.
Well, something that me and Mr. Britt, another host on this show, the founder of the Resistance Radio Network, we like to invest in physical silver bullion. What do you think about precious metals? Do you think that's something that can secure people's wealth and weather the storm?
Gold and silver, in my eye, are the only money. That's just how it is. They are the only money. I mean, no fiat currency is backed by anything, but gold retains it. Gold and silver retain it their worth, you know, and they always will. So as long as you have that, then you will retain a lot of your wealth. I mean, we will see a pullback in the price, because when the dollar collapses, we'll see a pullback in the price, and I don't know where it goes then. I mean, it might go whatever the new world reserve currency is, but I'm telling everyone, get yourselves into gold, and for the majority of the people who don't have like as much money to invest in gold, silver is the absolute one to invest in. And I think in 2011 you're going to see silver outperform gold. It's not going to go above gold prices, it never will, but it will certainly outperform gold. And also follow this. I mean, one of the great advocates of buying silver is one of my favourite economists, Max Kaiser. The buy silver crash JP Morgan. I've done an article on that last month, I think it was. Got received greatly, and that's another thing that's helping to show up these what he calls them financial terrorists, because he's exposed JP Morgan and all their dodgy underhand dealings, but by buying silver and getting the mass people to sort of join in on that, they're crashing them. And like, I mean, you take away JP Morgan and then the dominoes will start to fall. So, you know, hopefully more people do buy silver. I certainly buy a lot of it. I will continue to buy a lot of it. And, you know, with silver, you've got a safe bet. All of these other people, I mean, the people that you see that talk against silver and against gold, these are the people who have interests in, you know, dollar and other dollar rate related stocks and commodities, you know. So by more people heading into gold and silver and dropping stocks, you're going to see the Dow move down, and all of the global stock markets lose points after points after points. And all of these people who have invested interest in these, I mean, people like Warren Buffett and George Soros to a certain extent, and people like that who say that gold won't be the lasting thing, are just absolutely crazy. They're saying it because they've got invested interest in dollar-related commodities and things like this.
Well, the thing that made me sort of stop and think was we started seeing all these cash for gold adverts on television. Send your gold here, we'll give you 3p for it.
Cash your gold here. That's what I was saying earlier. We've got it's so in people's faces, this whole this phony system that we've got, but people still aren't accepting it. People just see these cash your gold adverts and all of these other cash converter places as just pawn shops for just a quick bit of cash. Thinking, oh, that's brilliant. I can just sell off something there and I can buy, and I can have a little bit of extra cash. No, they want your gold because that's the only thing that's going to be of worth in a few years' time. But again, people aren't accepting this because I think for the most part, they want to accept it, and who would? It's unbelievable to think of. You'd lose a lot of sleep over it. But people just need to retain whatever gold they have, even if they do have some. If they do, good luck, amazing. But yeah, certainly don't give it up to these cash your gold sort of places where they do give you pennies for what can be worth, thousands.
If we go back to this crash JP Morgan silver thing, how exactly is that playing out? Can you explain to people why that would crash JP Morgan? They're sort of in it in paper form, and it's kind of false value. Can you just explain how buying physical silver would
what happened with JP Morgan is
ruin JP Morgan?
They're doing a thing called they're naked short selling silver, which means that they own they just sell paper contracts that are not backed by any physical silver. So they're telling people that they're buying silver, and they're sending them a bit of paper that says you now own silver, and because it's got a header and a footer that says JP Morgan, the big bank, we won't lie to you, whatever, and people are just taking that as read and thinking, yes, I now own silver. That's why it's so important to, when you buy silver, make sure it's from a reputable source. I mean, I'll post a couple of links on my blog later on, that you make sure that you say, I want the physical silver delivered. I mean, the delivery's peanuts. But if someone sends you a bit of paper saying you own silver, I'm afraid 9 times out of 10 you won't. But we're going back to JP Morgan and how it crashed them is because in 2009, when the silver market started being manipulated, it came when Bear Stearns, that they held most of the contracts in silver, and what they were doing is they were cornering the market and bringing down the price of silver by selling off all of these contracts known as naked short selling, with again nothing back, never actually owning the security. So now when you buy physical silver and you're taking the silver off the market, then their contracts are going to be showing up when people who own their bits of paper say, oh, can I have the physical silver? JP Morgan turn around and go, no, we haven't got it. And then if they haven't got it, then they can't cover these contracts, then they will have to default and crash.
Do you think the government would come in and help JP Morgan if that was the case, or would they let it crash?
In an ideal world, they would let them crash, but I think realistically, the government would be there the day before anyone knew it was going to crash, giving them a loan. That's how tied in JP Morgan are with these political people. I mean, the amount of lobbyists that they have in Washington is an absolute joke. JP Morgan Chase now, I mean, there's another one, they took on Chase. JP Morgan are the ones that I think are running this sort of business of the markets over there. So I don't think they'll be able to fail, but certainly we can try with this silver. I mean, technically they wouldn't be left anywhere else to go if they were showing up with this silver market game, but who knows what the government will do to help them out. I imagine everything they could possibly do.
What's your take on Ron Paul? Do you think he's somebody that can sort this out in the US, or is he kind of a loner that is going up against a beast and is not really gonna get anywhere? I believe he's actually taken some kind of job regulating the Fed or something that I read a little while ago. What's your take on
all of
Ron
those
Paul?
things? He's a fantastic man. For again, a devout Austrian. I look forward to meeting him in this summer when I'm over at the Von Mises Academy. He is up against the the majority of the American population. I thoroughly recommend his book, End the Fed, to your listeners and to everyone. But he is someone that can sort it out over there, but whether or not he's been left with anything to sort out, I mean, I don't really believe that there is a turnaround for America now. I think it is just too far gone. I mean, a few years ago then, when he first ran for presidency, then yeah, I mean, maybe he could have saved something, but with the last couple of years, we've seen the Federal Reserve pump billions into the US economy and take down the dollar, then I don't think there's really anything left worth saving in America. But, you know, I'm a full supporter of Ron Paul. I love his work. I love what he stands for. I think everyone should get behind him. Even over here, there's a group, the International Supporters of Ron Paul, that everyone should head over and join. I wish there was more people like him. I wish we had the English equivalent over here, because we still are in a position to maybe turn things around and save it. But as yet, there's no one, again, sort of, I use that word loosely, in power that is here for us.
Yeah, well, that moves me on to a sort of second idea, that there are a few people that are sort of into this idea of debt-free money. It's something that I've talked about quite a lot recently, in the sense that people, through some kind of tightly regulated public institution, it doesn't have to be government, it probably shouldn't be government, but that the people can issue currency debt-free to spend into public services. We do need a new kind of system, obviously. I'm not positive that would be the road to go. There's lots of things to iron out in that respect, and it would probably be extremely difficult to put into place. But we have an MP called Douglas Carswell over here that's pushing for that. We've got the Bromsgrove group, who had Bill Still from the Money Masters over a few months ago, pushing this idea of debt-free money. Is that a possibility? Is it the right road to take, the wrong road to take? What's your take on debt-free money?
There are great things that come from it. I mean, right now we're in our situation, I think it is a great way to go. But I mean, there are some bad things to come of this. You know, I mean, like you say, I think there. I don't know. I'm not sure if it's what you are talking about now, but there's online with this virtual money system that can't be made in that they control the amount of it in circulation. Is that what you're talking about with that?
It's a concept where you kind of slowly end the fractional reserve system, where the banks can lend out money out of thin air, and effectively the government then creates money out of thin air in a tightly controlled measure and spends it into public services, and that's how it gets into the economy. So we have everything we need. You know, there's the idea of inflation that, you know, I'm not the expert on it. I mean, Bill Still, obviously from the Money Masters, great documentary, and the Secrets of Oz, he goes in to explain how it wouldn't cause inflation and all this kind of thing. But I was just wondering if you'd heard of it.
If Bill Still says it's a good idea, then it probably is. I'm a huge fan of his, like you say, the Secrets of Oz and the Money Masters, absolutely fantastic documentaries. But yeah, so I'd definitely be behind Bill. But yeah, I'd like to look into it a little further.
What are some of the things, you know, the everyday things people in Britain can do to sort of, other than silver, to sort of just secure their wealth and remain somewhat above the pit that's rising?
There's not a whole great deal that people can do. I mean, you've got what these sort of financial oligarchs are trying to do is eliminate the middle class and just end up with one big sort of poor working class system. But with the money people do have, like, yeah, buy silver. But what we need to do as well is just buy up real assets. Get out of don't hold your pounds in your pocket, because every day you do, it's devaluing. I mean, there was a documentary on Britain's £1 trillion horror story, I think it was called. They say on there that if you had £100 in the bank in 2009, in 2010, it's now worth £95. So, but if you bought up assets, like real assets, then you do get the benefit of appreciation and things like that. You also get depreciation, but you won't get it at a rate that inflation will be eating away if you were to save it in your bank. So I think the easiest way for people to sort of hold on to a bit of their wealth is to buy up some real assets. But again, there is no other better alternative than to get into silver.
Well, one thing I'll be doing this week is cancelling my credit card, and I'd advise other people out there to cancel their credit cards. I mean, what is the point on getting something on credit? It's just, it's false. You can get into trouble with that. But one problem with that, which I want to get your take on, is something that's been coming out slowly recently in regard to the war on terror and this sort of big brother state, is that they're starting to demonize people that don't want to be part of the system. There was a Homeland Security video recently come out where it shows a hotel checking in area, and the woman's like really shocked that this guy doesn't want to pay with his credit card, and she goes over to her supervisor and is like, why is he not paying with his credit card? This is weird. Is he a terrorist? And we had this big advert on TalkSport that actually got thrown off the air because, I put it on YouTube. Something like 40,000 people watched it. There was lots of complaints and they threw it off the air, but they were saying, if you close your curtains, if you don't talk to your neighbours. I mean, I don't really know anyone that does talk to their neighbours, but if you use cash, if you're out of this, trying to get out of the system, then you're a terrorist. So yeah. It's kind of a tough situation that we're in. But I'd advise people to get off the grid, maybe grow your own food, go to smaller shops, not the big corporations.
I remember speaking to you a few months ago, and when I was on your website, and I got linked to that video on TalkSport, and I'm a huge sports fan. So even to have such a program on a TalkSport radio show, I mean, there's something already inherently wrong with that. But with the idea of getting off the grid and getting off the system, yes, but absolutely do it. I'm looking into doing it at the minute, but because it's almost an easier path to take now, because I'm not sure if you've heard of a guy called John Harris, who looks into this free man of the land business. Yeah. Because he's made it available to people and the knowledge to people to be able to get off the grid and to be able to not have to pay tax and to not have sort of these identifications, sort of like a driving license and things like this. The government are now going to start implementing these things to demonize it and to go, well, yeah, you definitely don't want to do that because you could be a terrorist, you could be labeled a terrorist. And it's that word, terrorist. If you don't do this, you're a terrorist. If you don't tie your shoes up in a double bow, you're a terrorist. All of these sorts of things. It's an absolute joke. But again, what you say with to create some prosperity for yourself and your families, do grow your own food and things like that, because what we're going to see is in a few years, seeds and these non-hybrid seeds as well that these corporations sort of use, they're going to be the things that are going to hold wealth, because we could turn to a barter system, and things like these seeds and growing your own things, learning to be self-sustainable, basically. That's what we need to go back to, and that's what we used to be like. If you go back through your history, like your ancestors, people were self-sustainable, and what we've done is we've allowed ourselves to be to enter this illusion that we need all of these things, like things we take for granted now, like even central heating, paying off big companies for that, credit cards, cars. All of these things, we've allowed ourselves to think, oh, I need this because next door has it, even though I don't talk to them anymore because we don't have any community. I need to be better than them, Don't agree with this system. Like you say, don't go to big sort of food outlets. One of my absolute favourite people to listen to talking on the trends is Gerald Talente. I don't know if you know him. He talks about the 20% solution. If 20% of the people don't go to these places, he says, like Walmart and things like that, over here with Tesco's and Asda's, don't go there, and they go back to their local butchers, and they eat good, and they support themselves and support local businesses and self-sustaining community businesses, then that is where real prosperity and freedom comes from. Don't support these masses, and if we don't support them, and if 20% of the people don't go to them, then their profits will be slashed, and hopefully they'll start shutting down left, right and centre, and they won't force us to go in there by having 24-hour sort of superstores at the end of every road in Britain and things like that. So that is a completely viable situation to go down to. The 20% solution, I urge everyone to look it up, support your local sort of food outlets and businesses, butchers, and grow your own vegetables as well. It's extremely easy to do. I do it here in my home, and it's not only is it rewarding, it's cost effective, and you don't rely on any of these corporations that pump chemical after chemical into our food. And it's a lot better for you and everyone around us. So perfect solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the internet is a wealth of information for sort of growing your own food. Even if you live in a block of flats and you've only got a small piece of concrete on a roof, you can still grow food. There's so many different things you can do now in regards to growing food. You can do that. And I think what you're saying is a real version of David Cameron's Big Society, something where we actually are working together and sort of getting off the grid. Of course, Cameron's Big Society is we've got these community leaders, we've got this much fake money, sort it out yourselves. But a real big society, I think, is something that we need to work towards. And I think that about wraps things up for us today. It's been a very interesting and enlightening interview. Is there anything else you'd like to tell listeners?
What I always say at the end in all of my interviews is don't take any said as the truth. Go out and research it yourself. Like you said, there's a wealth of knowledge out there. It's easy to educate yourself, and this is what the people don't want. It's what these corporate people don't want. They don't want us to be educated. So we do need to share the information. Get over to my blog. There's links there. Tell your friends and family, and let's see if we can turn this around and actually get some prosperity for ourselves, because by God, we deserve it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again to the Economic Assassin Graham Sharkey. Be sure to check out his website at economicassassin.blogspot.com, and we hope to hear more from Graham in the near future. There you go, folks. That was a perspective from an Austrian economist, Graham Sharkey, and I hope we'll be hearing more from him in the future. Of course, coming up on radio in a few minutes will be the Rabbit Hole Orientation Show with Hairy Cookie Monster, of course. Really enjoyed that last week. I think Cookie's a great orator. Definitely gets you thinking, gets the old cogs working. So I'm definitely going to be sticking around for that. That will be at 9:30 p.m, so basically half an hour from now. But other than that, that's about me done tonight, folks. Thanks for all tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the interview. I'm going to be working on getting more guests now instead of me just rambling. I mean, there's only so much of me you can take. It's time to start bringing in other people from other, people with other expertise to get the ball rolling. So thanks, everybody. I'll see you next week at same time, same place.